Mayor Savage, I can confirm we are streaming. You can call the meeting to order on your call.
All right. Okay, folks. Nice to see everybody as we look forward to March break. Right, next week, I think. Beautiful sunny day here in Halifax to kick off the summer, and then we resume winter tomorrow, apparently. So I want to thank everybody. I also want to acknowledge that we are in Mi'kma'ki, which is the traditional unceded land of the Mi'kmaq people. And we as Nova Scotians believe that we are all treaty people in accordance with the treaties of peace and friendship signed between the Mi'kmaq and the Crown. So I'll call the meeting to order. The order of business, does somebody want to move the order of business? Unless somebody has any additions or deletions, I'll just remind people we have a special regional council meeting today, which is primarily to allow us to go back to meeting in person and some things that we have to do in order to make that happen. And then we'll have a budget meeting Chair Russell will take. On the order of business for the council, special council meeting, does somebody want to move that?
So moved, Mr. Mayor.
Moved by Deputy, thank you.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Councillor Cuttle. All in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? That's carried. I'll call for declarations of conflict of interest. And now this is where the meeting's going to start to move quickly, so you got to pay attention. Notices of motion, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a notice of motion. Take notice that at a future meeting of Halifax Regional Council, I propose to move amendments to Administrative Order 1, the procedure of the Council Administrative Order, the purpose of which is to include procedures to allow for virtual meetings after the provincial state of emergency ends in accordance with the HRM Charter Section 16A. Thank you.
Thank you. That's all we need there, Ian, for now on that one.
Mayor Savage, I wasn't able to pipe up when we were doing the approval of the agenda. We did have an added item as well that we did receive consent for. That was for a notice of motion for yourself from Ukraine. So we could do that. That was approved. So we could do that notice of motion as well. I just would need a quick additional procedural motion just to include that as an added item.
Okay. So all those who, I just ask if people approve that one added item being added to the agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. Then under notices of motion, can I read it from here? The Deputy Mayor is here. If I step out of line, she can fix it over and take control. But I'll do a notice of motion that HRM commit up to $50,000 to support humanitarian efforts in support of Ukraine as a result of the invasion by Russian forces. For the CAO to consult with local Ukrainian community and others to identify best use of funds and return to council with a recommendation. Okay, I think that's it for the meeting. I hope everybody enjoyed it and got a lot out of it, as much as I did. Thank you, Deputy Mayor, for the thumbs up. So I think then, Ian, unless I'm mistaken, we can adjourn this meeting and go right into the budget meeting. I don't think people need we don't need a half-hour break or anything, do we? We're good?
It's been a long slog, but yeah, I think we'll be okay.
Adjourn, Mr. Mayor.
So we can adjourn the meeting. Thank you, Councillor Mason. I accept the motion to adjourn. We are adjourned. And I will now hand things over to the Chair of Audit and Finance, Chair of the Budget Committee of the Whole.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Hopefully more and more of our council meetings will be that quick. So I'd like to call to order the Special Budget Committee meeting. It is now 1:07 p.m. One of the things that we didn't do with the last meeting, and so I'm going to take care of it in this one, is just making sure that everybody's audio and video are working. So let's start with Councillor Daigle-Gammon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, colleagues, staff, and anybody from the public that's here. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Councillor Hensby, District 2, good afternoon.
President accounted for, sir.
Good stuff, thank you. Councillor Kent, District 3, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and colleagues and staff.
And Councillor Purdy, District 4, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Austin, District 5. Good afternoon.
I'm here, Mr. Chair.
Good stuff. Thank you. Councillor Mancini, District 6. Good afternoon.
Aloha, I'm here.
Good stuff. Councillor Mason, District 7. Good afternoon.
Hello, Mr. Chair. Happy to be here.
Good stuff. Councillor Smith, District 8. There you are.
Hello, colleagues and those listening. Happy to be here. Look forward to the meeting.
Good stuff. Thank you. Councillor Cleary, District 9. Good afternoon.
Hello, Mr. Chair. I'm coming to you on my phone en route. I'll be at my desk and visible in a few minutes.
Good stuff. Thank you. Councillor Morse, District 10. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, everyone. Ready to go.
Good stuff. Thank you. Councillor Tuttle, District 11. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. I'm here representing Scarfield, Sambro Loop, and the Prospect communities.
Good stuff. Thank you. Councillor Stoddard, District 12. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you and good afternoon to all those who are watching, colleagues and staff. Happy Friday.
Happy Friday. Deputy Mayor Lovelace, District 13. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, coming to you from City Hall, where this morning we raised the flag for Sierra Leone to recognize the 230th anniversary of the 15 ships that arrived in Freetown. Very exciting, and the flag continues to fly at City Hall.
Good stuff. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Blackburn, District 14. Good afternoon.
Happy Friday, one and all, and let's get at it and bake this budget. Thank you.
Good stuff. Thank you. All in favor of skipping Councillor Outhet? No. Go ahead, Tim. District 16. Good afternoon.
Hello to all from sunny Bedford, Wentworth.
And Mr. Mayor, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chair, and good afternoon, colleagues.
And next, I'd like to acknowledge that, as the mayor did a few minutes ago, that the Halifax Regional Municipality is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. The municipality acknowledges the peace and friendship treaties signed in this territory and recognizes that we are all treaty people. Approval of the minutes is none. Approval of the order of business and approval of additions and deletions. Can I have a motion for that?
I so move.
Thank you, Councillor Stoddard, seconder. Councillor Kent, I saw you wave your hand.
Thank you. I'll second that.
Thank you. Is there anything on that, Mr. Clerk, or from any members of council? Not seeing anything. All in favor of the order of business as presented, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say nay. Great. Call for declaration of conflicts of interest.
Or independence.
Or independent, sure.
Like you were going to say.
Yeah. And not seeing any. We are next on to the public participation section of this meeting. And for today's budget meeting, no speakers have signed up for the deadline. As a reminder to those who are watching from home, in order to have signed up as a speaker, the deadline was 4:30 p.m. Yesterday, the business day prior to this meeting. So at this point, we have a presentation from Chief Kinsella related to the Halifax Regional Police and the RCMP budget deferred from February 26, 2022. Go ahead, Chief. The floor is yours.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Chair, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and the members of the public who are joining us today. Thank you once again for the opportunity to present on the 2022-2023 Halifax Regional Police budget. Most recently, on March 9th, the Board of Police Commissioners approved a new revised proposal that we bring to you today with a revised list of service enhancements. And further to all the discussions and deliberations and engagement and thought that went into this process, and deservedly so, Halifax Regional Police is today proposing an operating budget of $89,195,000. This represents a net operating budget increase of $384,200 compared to last fiscal, amounting to an increase of 0.433%. And I will note that this does not include the amounts associated with the newly approved collective agreement. This revised proposal features requests that will help fill some of our most critical operational gaps in the frontline response and communications. Additionally, the resource associated with the Hate Crimes Unit is an important resource that will allow us to do more in an area which has historically been underserved and underreported. As I said at the Board of Police Commissioners meeting, it is an area where we must do better in a rapidly growing, diverse, and multicultural city's police service. Today's presentation for me will be brief and essentially to present a financial summary of the new proposal. I'll be happy to take your questions afterwards, along with members of the team who are with me here today. Once again, thank you for your engagement, attention to detail, and thoroughness during this process. I think we can all agree that this budget has been reviewed with the utmost rigor and accountability, as it should have. As a result, today's proposal most importantly reflects both the community's calls for reform and scrutiny, and at the same time highlights the need for critical resources we need to deliver on in public safety and policing. And I would like to once again take the opportunity to acknowledge the service of the Halifax Regional Police members, both civilian and sworn. They work hard day in and day out, and I know that they are incredibly committed to supporting our community and to continually do better. And with that, can we go to the next slide? The next two slides cover the operating budget proposal and key timelines. Next slide. And next slide. Here is a revised list of service enhancement. These resources are responsive to our most critical gaps that we have discussed in detail over the past meetings. Additionally, as I said in my opening, we are really hoping to bolster our ability and overall capacity to investigate hate crimes and hate incidents and provide some support for the front line in our communications response. We made adjustments that we believe fill some of the most critical gaps and support our members. We will continue to take a multifaceted approach and continue to address the pressures in totality, and this increase in capacity will help. I will now ask Mr. Craig Horton to walk you through the next two financial slides. Next slide, please.
Good afternoon, Budget Committee, and through Chair, through you. This slide is a summary slide that will help break down how we got to where we were, where we are today. So the current operating budget for Halifax Regional Police for 21-22 is $88,810,800. The target that was assigned to Halifax Regional Police, which, as you know, was based on all the discussions on the fiscal framework and the establishing of the proposed tax rate, came in at $87,830,000, which is a decrease of $980,800 from the current fiscal year. Adding in the service enhancements that the chief is discussing today of $1,365,000, we arrive at the proposed net operating budget with service enhancements of $89,195,000. From year to year, that increase is 0.433% or $384,200. And again, I just want to reiterate, this does not include the increases that are as a result of the recent Halifax Regional Police Association collective agreement that was approved recently in the new year. Next slide, please. This is a summary of expenditures and revenues. It was actually in the presentation that was done on February 23rd, our initial presentation. It shows the actuals from 2020-21 for all our expenditures and revenues, the budget that we're currently in for 2021-22, our PA projections, which would have been at the end of November, and the proposed budget for next year. The difference with this slide this time around is it does include the $1,365,000 in service enhancements that we're discussing today. From that aspect.
Next slide, please. And finally, this slide provides the description and the associated amounts for the various service enhancements that we have asked for and have been presented various times in various forms, but this is the final list coming in at just over $1.365 million. And with that, we're happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you very much, Chief Kinsella. I'm just looking to the chat. If anybody would like to ask any questions of the chief, then please indicate that in the chat. Go ahead, Councillor Mason.
Nobody wants to be first. So my question for staff, could be the chief, could be HRM staff, is what is the dollar value of callback overtime that was spent or is projected to have been spent in the last fiscal year? That was my question last meeting. I understand it wasn't presented to the board. To me, that's the critical number here.
Okay, you'll just have to bear with us. We do have the information. We're just going to have to refer back to one of the previous presentations that we provided to both council and the board. Just if you could just give it.
We can move on to somebody else, Mr. Chair, if you want to keep it rolling. I see it's filled up now that I broke the ice, and we can come back to me maybe after one or two answers.
Okay, thank you. Councillor, Deputy Mayor, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And you only broke the ice by like a millisecond. So I actually have a question for RCMP. Do we have RCMP on the call today? Because we are debating the police budget, correct?
We're debating the RCMP, or sorry, the HRP budget, but we do have the RCMP on the call, and we can see them. And go ahead.
Okay, great, thank you. Because you know, what we're doing here today is actually debating the complete police budget. And while I understand there's a lot of attention being placed and lots of questions on the HRP budget, as we saw the other day with the Police Commission board, you know, I do think it's paramount that we also ask questions of our RCMP police force, who are, you know, extremely important, especially in those rural areas where we rely on them and the service that they provide. So, the Chief Superintendent, I have a question for you. I just came from the 1792 presentation on historical racism that Black members of our population of our city have faced, this incredible oppression and injustices. And one of the things that we continue to hear from members of African descent is, why have the RCMP not apologized for carding and stopped carding? And so what I'm trying to understand is where that plays in the policies of RCMP, and will we be seeing you know, some commitment to recognize the injustices of Black and people of color in Halifax?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor, and through you, Chair. I do appreciate that question. So prior to me coming to Halifax District in an acting capacity, I was certainly aware of the calls for the RCMP to apologize for the practices of street checks, and I recognize the harm that that's caused. Of note and of interest to me, though, is that from a personal perspective, I am not opposed to issuing an apology on behalf of the RCMP for that. And in fact, I started conversations with our diversity committee here on that very topic. I think what's very important is that when we are in a position to do that, and I think that we are in a position to do that, that it be done in a manner that the community itself would like to see that being done. So we're actually working through that right now, and I would like to be able to leave council with some level of confidence that the RCMP will actually be coming to the table. And I've actually had conversations with our national headquarters about that previously.
I really appreciate that, considering Halifax has the oldest and largest African heritage here in the country. On another note, Mr. Chair, if I may, I just have one quick question.
Is it budget related?
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you. So last year, and I understand, Chief Superintendent, you were not present to present the budget, but last year there were additions that were requested by RCMP, yet this year we do not see those additions. And so I'm trying to understand how Halifax District has mitigated or adapted to address those, because they were identified in the previous budget for 21-22. So I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit to where you sit with adding to your resources, and considering this defunding report that has come through. What are your expectations or ideas as far as recognizing what is in that report and potentially coming in the future for any suggestions or creative solutions?
Thanks, Deputy Mayor, and through you, Chair. I'm not sure if those of you from our previous council meeting on the budget, I did actually express that the RCMP were not going to be making a request for additional resources for this year. Yes, Deputy Mayor, you're correct. Last year, there was a request for one resource for the Halifax RCMP. However, that request was not supported. As I mentioned in our previous meeting with council, is that as a team, the management team here in Halifax District, we're very interested in the defunding report. We've had an opportunity to digest that report, and we are having ongoing discussions related to that. And in fact, my colleagues within the HRP, and certainly Chief Kinsella can speak to this, we've actually had a conversation about having further conversations collectively about the report and charting out some ideas. As I said in my address in our last meeting, we made a decision not to make a budget request. I think it's fair to say that when we look at the ratio of police officers per population within Halifax District, and I know that the Department of Justice would support this as well with statistics, is that the RCMP resources within Halifax District are they're resourced even less than the rest of the RCMP resources within even the rest of the province of Nova Scotia. So it is important to have adequate resources for our policing. And in fact, when we cover such a great geographic area, it will have effects in terms of our response times because we have to travel significantly farther distances. So that's not lost on me, but it is very important that we do make every effort to listen, and we are listening, and that we want to work with the community about maybe identifying other ways for us to be able to conduct our business and being more efficient in that sense. So that was the purpose or the reason behind why we were not making a resource request for this upcoming year.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. And thank you, Mr. Chair, for indulging me.
Thank you. Next on the list is Councillor Tuttle. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so I just want to thank the question about the RCMP that Deputy Mayor Lovelace just asked around resourcing, and the answer about how the RCMP are resourced on a kind of, I guess the COP to population ratio, and noting how low it is. When I look at this recast budget, including what the options over budget are for the HRP, we note in here that there are 12 full-time patrol constables and as well as one member for the reintegration pilot program constable. And, I think a lot of this options over budget are related to work-related absences within HRP. So while I see the necessity of integration officer, my concern is still around the additional full-time patrol officers that we're adding to the force. And, through some research I've done over the last little while, I note that Halifax Regional Police has, the third highest number of police officers to 100,000 people of the population. If you take out our RCMP territory. So RCMP is around 89 officers per 100,000 and HRP around 209, with only Victoria and Montreal being higher. And I think once we add on these additional 12 full-time positions, if we're not top, we're going to be very close to it. So, for me, this is not, this is a lot to do with getting officers back to work. I mean, if the issue is around work-related absences, we need to focus on getting our officers back to work, supporting them in getting back to work. And it also needs to be about getting the absenteeism rate under control. And this is where I still don't understand what the bigger strategy is for doing that. We've kind of got to, we've got to stop this trend. And I don't know if there's any information around absenteeism within the police force, let's say over the last 10 years, to see how well we're mitigating this issue. But I think it's core to these discussions as well as this budget proposal. Do we really understand what's contributing to this issue? When I look at the police, they're well paid. We just had this binding arbitration pay increases. They're well resourced. They have the third highest police to population ratio. Halifax is a beautiful city to live in. And so I'm just trying to figure out, where does this end? So if we approve this budget now, where do we go next? And if Chief Kinsella could respond to some of these comments, I'd greatly appreciate that.
Thank you. Chief Kinsella, I don't see you. Oh, there you are.
Thanks, Chair, and my thanks to Councillor Cuddle as well for her comments. They are comments, and I'm going to shed a little bit of light on cop to pop, and then I suspect there'll be some more dialogue, which will be a good thing. So the police citizen ratios, or as they are also known as cop to pop ratios, are relatively simple formulas to be able to determine the number of sworn police officers in any given municipality, and most often used as a means of comparison amongst municipal police agencies. The number is obtained by dividing the sworn strength of the police agency by the total population and then multiplying by 100,000. For example, Vancouver has 1,330 police officers divided by a total population of 678,308. Multiplied by 100,000 is 196 for cop to pop. There has been some ongoing discussion around the cop to pop ratio for HRM and HRP specifically, which requires further conversation and analysis. The 2019 Statistics Canada report on police citizen ratios lists the cop to pop number for HRP as 209. This is based on a population of 253,841 and a sworn strength of 530. It also, however, recognizes the unique dual policing model and footnotes the actual cop to pop for HRM as 166 when the rural RCMP numbers are included. So if we were one big service, that would be the cop to pop. And you have to remember the various makeup of our great city, as was mentioned. And the other piece is the commuter traffic that comes and goes from the city. The data in the table also represents Halifax Regional Police, Nova Scotia, when you look at the StatsCan with the 209. However, this rate does not include the number of police officers from RCMP, as I mentioned. So if we include everything in with current population numbers and growth, the number would actually be 155 per 100,000. There are a few issues which arise from the distinction. Firstly, it is based on the address-based population of 253, which I mentioned. And as of July 2021, StatsCan has estimated the population of HRM at 460. The simple reality is the population which is policed by HRP is much greater than the census-based population. The commuter-adjusted population rises significantly based on where people work and where they come for education, entertainment, tourism, conferences, and many, many other reasons for coming into the urban area of HRM. Recent information also identified the downtown core of HRM as being among the fastest growing in the country. The existence of a commuter-adjusted population is true, of course, for every key municipality in the country. However, every other cop-to-pop formula in the country takes in the total population and not just the urban core to determine its true police-citizen ratio. However, because of the dual policing model, these numbers show an apparent discrepancy nationally. In other words, if you look at any major municipality, particularly a capital city, and only included the number of officers assigned within its core against the number of people who live in those areas, while not including those who consistently travel into those areas, and then comparing them to the number of officers within that same agency who were assigned to the outer suburban or rural areas, and the number would be who resided there, this discrepancy would be readily apparent. Of course, this is not done in any other municipal staffing analysis because it is unnecessary. Nobody else has the same policing model that we have, and they don't have the same types of discrepancy in the patrol or response areas. What it does clearly highlight is that it's not an accurate comparator when severed from the total police and population numbers. Any true beneficial analysis would require a comparison of the recognition of the realities of the urban policing environment and how that affects staffing models. Simply put, if HRM was served by a single police agency, these staffing numbers would remain relatively consistent. The other thing that we need to be cognizant of is our integrated CID model. Well over 100 HRP sworn officers are assigned to CID, which is responsible to investigate for all of HRM. So when you take the 100 off from 530, it goes down to 430. And that's why I say the calculations need to be looked at in great detail. When these numbers are considered, it further complicates the simple cop-to-pop equation for HRP. Lastly, in 2019, a report for HRM Council by Paravel and Taylor recognized the inherent challenges with delineating police-citizen ratios between HRP and RCMP, and actually established the number in the report at 181 based on their information at the time. So it's really important to understand, particularly at the council level, what is going on in the various geographic policing areas, what the population is, the commuter traffic, how the population moves around. It's not an exact model, and it is quite confusing, so I do understand Councillor Cuddle's comments, but I hope that sheds a little bit of light on it. And I also have Deputy Chief Don McLean, who's been policing in HRM for many, many years, and I'm going to invite him up just to give a little bit of a summary, so you hear it from somebody who's had the experience and been around.
Good afternoon through you to the council. Although every time I come up here, the chief makes notice of how long I've been here. I'm not really sure if that's a good thing or not, but the reality is this conversation around cop to pop just needs to be taken in the context of, we're talking about apples and oranges comparison here. This isn't about any other place, and this isn't about trying to, it's about recognizing that having that discussion on the dual policing model creates challenges when using it as a comparator to other agencies which don't have a dual policing model, which actually doesn't exist. So the challenge gets into trying to delineate between those who work in the urban environment, between those who work in the suburban to rural environment in terms of how that deployment gets. This isn't a question about the RCMP's deployment, that's for them totally to speak about, but this is about recognizing that this reality would exist anywhere across the country if you looked at to an agency and then you started to separate it between its different distinctions between what's downtown and what isn't. So it's just a matter of having a true understanding, and it becomes a bit of a challenge when you start using it as a comparator rather than just as a point of information in terms of the greater number. Because the issue about cop to pop is it always recognizes total population and not that of a severed one in terms of which happens in HRM. I understand why they do it, because simply HRP has to be distinguished within the StatsCan model, and they use a census-based population base. The challenge is, though, however, when that becomes a national comparator, it truly is an apples to oranges discussion.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Chief Kinsella. Councillor Morse, Councillor Cuttle. The time has passed, and thank you for coming back a second time. Councillor Morse, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question again for Chief Kinsella. Chief, you had proposed 2 full-time positions to investigate sexual assault cases. And could you say what the impact will be now that those 2 positions have been eliminated in this new budget? And what would be needed financially to get those positions back in this budget? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor, and through you, Chair. So really, the sexual assault investigative ask was really deals with capacity. The number of sexual assault investigations is on the rise. It was in the area of 400 per year back in 2011. It's up to 600 per year, give or take, in 2021. So we were looking at that ask to better serve victims. These are some of our most victimized individuals, all of that, and I have gone through it. So what it's going to mean is a little bit of reduced service, prioritization of the calls, a larger caseload for detectives, those kind of things. So in a nutshell, that's what that will mean. And the cost for the 2 detectives is an additional $165,700 for this year, not including the collective agreement.
Okay, can I follow up, Mr. Chair?
Absolutely.
Was there not a possibility to add a part-time or 1 position rather than both as an option in this recast budget?
Through you, Chair, we don't currently have an option for part-time police officers within our collective agreement or otherwise. So, there always is, and this goes on all the time, a readjustment of our resources to make sure we meet the needs of the community. So state detectives are highly trained. There's a number of courses they have to take. The individuals that are there, they get these courses. There is other detective work that can be done. We can, take detectives from GIS or other areas of CID to support, but they generally don't have, unless they're past state detective, unless they wouldn't necessarily have the training. They might. And then we would readjust depending on priorities, the cases that we have, all those kind of things. And that's an everyday thing that occurs here. What the ask would do is lower the caseload per detective, and allow that piece so they don't not carrying quite as heavy caseload. And I would say provide better service to the victims of crime.
Because they're specially trained.
They are, the ones that are in there are specially trained, correct.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Morse. Go ahead, Councillor Smith, but just as a reminder to everybody in the committee, where we are from a procedural point of view is the motion is still on the floor that we opened the previous budget committee meeting with. So go ahead, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. And I'm just going to put the amended motion on the floor that reflects the discussion today, if you don't mind. First, that the Budget Committee recommends the Halifax Regional Council approve the increase in Halifax Regional Police full-time equivalent, a position set out in revised options over budget financial summary in slide 7 of the March 11, 2022 Halifax Regional Police presentation to Budget Committee, attached together with the necessary adjustments to the 22-23 budget and business plan resulting from this increase in FTEs. And 2, the Budget Committee direct the Chief Administrative Officer to prepare the Halifax Regional Police 22-23 budget and business plan as approved by the Board of Police Commissioners on January 31st, 2022, subject to Regional Council approval and any increase in FTEs.
Thank you very much. So that is, I'm going to see that as an amendment to the motion that is already on the floor. Do we have a seconder for that amendment that was pasted in the chat a few minutes ago? Councillor Kent. Go. Thank you very much. So Councillor Smith on that larger motion.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, colleagues. So really quickly, I just want to, thank my commission. We had our meeting on Wednesday, I believe, to discuss the revisal, and I did have to do a lot of cheering that evening because there's a lot of good questions and a lot of procedural questions, and I really feel like we came out of that with a better understanding of what the future role of the Board of Police Commissions is when it comes to looking at how we should be expressing our powers related to policing budgets. So I just want to say thank you to my colleagues who were there and on the commission for that. I voted against the motion, not because I don't believe that we should be moving in this direction, but the two pieces that really, for me, one's morally and one is looking at the bigger picture. One, I really find it difficult to support this budget without having the victim services worker and the victim in the constable that would focus on the sexual assaults that are happening. For me, knowing that we're seeing sexual assault on the rise, to me, it's paramount that we try to do the best we can to deal with those issues as we see them come fit. And I know the chief is bringing forward what he feels and what his duty is as the chief to bring a budget that deals with these gaps. But to me, this is a gap that it's already been one that hasn't been addressed the way it could be. And I feel personally that we're not bringing that gap closer and bridging it without having those positions there to try to deal with that load. So that's one of the reasons why I can't vote for it. Really, I would have loved for us at the commission where, I have to give a shout out to Commissioner Critchley, who has been one of the most adamant commissioners on not having net new uniform officers added to the force, who brought forward an amendment that included uniform officers, but also included having the victim services piece in it. And so, I think we're all at the point where we know how important it is to deal with the issues that we're seeing with our force and dealing with the lack of net new officers with a growing city. But I do have the concern of not seeing those positions in there to deal with the sexual assault piece. So that's I support this overall, and I think it does deal with the issues that the chief is looking at. But morally, I really want to feel that we're trying to put a bigger emphasis on dealing with sexual assault, and I'm happy for the chief to weigh in on that if you like to. But I know that you're trying to work what you can to deal with the issues that you see on the day-to-day.
Well, thanks, Councillor and Commissioner as well. I know you're wearing two hats and you're very invested, and I very much appreciate our dialogue and your comments here today. So, none of this is easy. It's always a challenge. I don't make any decisions in isolation on what we do and what we serve and who goes where. We have a very strong team of skilled professionals here at HRP that discuss it and make the best assessments we can. And, that's why I brought the initial ask that included the sexual assault investigators and the victim services position and the freedom of information position and the 8 emergency section communicators, because that's the need currently of the police. That's the need that will help us get out of the cycle that we're in. That's the need that would best serve the community. The council has spoken, and we had our meeting, and I was sent back with an amount, and the council said, here's the amount we're looking at, and what can you do, and what would you suggest for this amount? And this is a dialogue and a discussion, and it's an important one. We listen to the community, and we certainly have Also looked at the defunding report because we know it's a very important document, and we look at it through a lens of that as well. We brought this first to the Board of Police Commissioners in December. And, the collective agreement wasn't signed at the time. It was being worked on. The defunding report wasn't out yet. But nothing's changed since that day for our need in policing. And, it is a very important area, the sexual assault unit. And what we do, and I mentioned the other night, Councillor, at our meeting, is, we're given an amount of money. We're asked to provide a service. And we, it's important that we tell you where we would like to put the positions. But that isn't where it ends. We go back now and we continually do evaluate what services are we delivering. And we do this all the time to my comments to Councillor Morse. We evaluate what services are required, where do we put them, how do we move people around. I'll go quickly back to our community response officers and school liaison officers. A number of them are assisting currently full-time in the patrol branch. When we need them and on patrol, the ones that work those particular hours, we bring them to patrol for those hours. If we run into a larger issue in sexual assault, we will make sure that we adjust resources to make sure that those investigations are being done. And we're not going to drop in service in sexual assault. The detectives are going to be carrying more cases, as I said, and they're going to be, having to adjust and when they do their investigations, prioritize. Everything's done on a priority basis. So those are all, important aspects. 2 years ago, I came before this council and I identified a very necessary need to address a gap in supervision. Some of you that were on the council may remember those discussions. The advice of council at the time was, yeah, Chief, we hear you, we understand, but we need you to go back and figure that out and see how you can make those changes internally. And I did that. I went back and we worked hard with the team and we made those changes to make sure that we have the appropriate supervision, particularly in the area of the prisoner care facility, and particularly in the area of how we do our internal investigations in our professional standards division. So we looked after that, and that wasn't easy. Other things had to be deprioritized to make sure that we could do that. That's part of the job. That's the reality of what we live with here. This particular ask, this capacity build, is for today, but more importantly, it's for tomorrow, next month, next year. I believe I've provided very clearly with the team where the need is, the cycle that we're on as it relates to our inability to staff the front line without undue hardship on our members and without the pulling back of services in the community response office, the school liaison officer office, the quick response unit, the traffic unit. These are the realities of how we have to adjust every day. And even at the frontline level, our watch commanders are working on and spending inordinate amount of time getting staff to be out on the street and not really doing exactly what they're supposed to be doing. That creates pressures across the organization. That creates all the things that are happening to us at this current time. So I hope that helps shed a little bit of light, and we're happy to take any other questions.
Thank you, Chief Kinsella. Go ahead, Councillor Outfit.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation and of course all the great comments and questions so far. I want to start by saying that I am so encouraged and pleased for what I heard from the new RCMP folks regarding the possibility of an apology and the possibility of really learning from the defunding report and looking at their, in time for next year, what their resources might be and perhaps what could be detasked, retasked from RCMP, and then of course what they might need to improve patrolling in our growing rural areas. So very pleased with what I've heard, and I look forward to hearing more about that. There's two questions I have. I believe the other day when we were debating before it went back to the police commission, a number of us chatted about how long it'd been since an sworn uniformed officer had been added and our population had been growing. And I think it might have been Sean who mentioned it, that we had grown by something like 65,000 people and we hadn't added an officer in 6 or 8 years. So if someone could confirm that for me, perhaps the chief, I would appreciate it. The other thing I want us to go back to, because I am, again, very much intrigued and in support of many of the 36 recommendations that came forward from the defunding report. And one of the things we heard during public input on the police budget was that there are some things that could be better handled perhaps by someone who isn't in uniform, isn't sworn. And one of those was the sexual assault folks. And what made me think of this is when Councillor Smith mentioned that, and I'll put words in his mouth, that he might have supported this budget if we'd increased it even more and added the sexual assault people. So I thought that was an interesting comment. But how do we go about, and can we, this might be a question for Jacques or John, if he feels strongly about that, and if we do, could we again send this back and say, what would it cost to add these two folks to this? Because I agree with him that this is a very important thing. The second thing is, what can we do before the defund report continues to work its way through the police commission? And I'm very encouraged with what's going to happen there as I think it was Councillor Blackburn's motion is going to be acted on. Could a sexual assault person be hired and perhaps report to Amy Siciliano instead of into HRP? So I'd like to find out how we go about doing that, or if we have to wait till the police commission has done their work on the overall report, if you will, from Dr. Jones and her colleagues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Outfit. Jacques has popped up, so go ahead, Jacques.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. So in terms of the budget that you have before you now, that's the recommendation coming from the Board of Police Commissioners based on Council's direction at the last meeting. So Council at any time can say no to this budget today and send instructions back to the Board of Police Commissioners like you did the last time. There are logistical and timing challenges around that, but that's certainly a possibility if Council so wishes. The idea of hiring somebody within the CAO's business unit where public safety arises associated with this matter is a possibility as well, right? So if, but we would have to take a hard look at that. That would take a staff report. I would have to have some broader consultation with my team, with Paul Johnson, with Amy herself, and look at what the possibilities are. And so that's not an immediate thing. That would take some conversations and understanding and see how we can make that happen. That's something that could happen mid-year. I mean, I have the flexibility as CAO to add positions where it falls, where the entire budget envelope is not compromised, right? But nonetheless, that would take some analysis on my part and advice from Paul and Amy on that as well. So, and with the chief, and to see, and with the RCMP, because obviously this is kind of an integrated matter, and public safety is and we're working on a public safety strategy now, and that public safety strategy we're hoping to land by the end of this calendar year in front of Council. Much of the debate and issues that you're talking about will come out of that public safety strategy. We're into a broader consultation. Amy's going to be starting that probably by around the 1st of April, getting into more depth of that review. And at the same time, we're on the verge of bringing back a report to Council, awarding. I think I'm going to have to bring it back to Council. I'll have to verify the actual dollar amounts, but we're going to award an RFP proposal to a specialized firm to look at the overall police review, which will take up to 2 years to complete. So that of course will take into account the work that Amy is doing now, the so-called police defunding report that the Board of Police Commissioners recently received, And all of that will feed into a final recommendation. So a long answer to say that, yes, you could actually send it back to the Board of Police Commissioners if you wish, asking them, giving them instructions or adding more money to the budget, and giving them a dollar value and ask them to come back. Ultimately, council decides what the plan of establishment is for HRP, right? So you decide how many officers there are, how many support staff there are, and all of that. That's in council's authority, right? So you've got the advice from the Board of Police Commissioners now based on the dollar amount that you had, and if council wishes to add to that a dollar amount and add more bodies, and it's free to do so. But it is obliged to seek the counsel of the Board of Police Commissioners in doing that as well. John?
Thanks, Jacques. So two points. One at the outset. So the priorities of HRP are set by the board under Section 55 of the Police Act. So certainly, if the priority is sexual assault investigations, then the board can set that as a priority and under its mandate for HRP, and the chief would then have the power to deploy his resources, manpower, accordingly to meet that priority. And so within his existing complement, right? That would have operational impacts on HRP, but that is one way to go about making that a priority within the existing complement and otherwise. So that's always open, and the chief has said that already on a couple of occasions in terms of saying, look, the priorities will shift from time to time, and I'll move my manpower around as I'm needed. So, out of deference to the Board of Police, the municipality council has, and it's embedded in the bylaw, essentially been taking the position that we would send back to the board an overarching budget number, and that's up to the board then to display. Jacques is absolutely correct, though, that if you flip that somewhat, which hasn't been our practice, but certainly in this case where all of the overs relate to FTEs, to officers and other staff, then certainly the complement, as Jacques has said, is at council's discretion. If council wishes, and we have brought forward the amended, drafted in the way we have to allow, if the amendment passes, it would certainly then be up to council to propose or vote on amendments to what would then be the amended main motion, which incorporates at that point, if the amendment passes, 12 patrol constables, the one hate crimes detective constable, to either increase sworn officers or decrease sworn officers from what would then be the amended office. That would not offend, the overall statutory scheme, which is to say, council decides the size of the police force. The board sets the budget number, overarching way. So we've tried to bring this around so that you wouldn't necessarily get into a match where you're throwing things back and forth on the budget side. And we can do it this year because that all of the overs are FTEs in effect. So that's the way I would propose it. I think, the board, though, and council is required to consult with the board. The board provided a recommendation based on Dan's advice of the budget and the FTEs that they feel are required. Council disagreed with that, sent it back with a lower number, and you have now been provided their advice. The majority will, based on Dad's input. So you can either take that now as proposed in the amended motion, or accept amended motion and then seek to amend it further. Recognizing, though, that certainly it really depends on the policies that are set out as by the board and Dan. So that step, though, would have obviously cost implications, and the motion reflects that. So if you increase the FTEs, then obviously the budget will go up by that amount of money at the end of the day. Effectively, though, you've set the overall budget. So hopefully that helps in terms of trying to.
John, very much appreciate your comments on shocks. If I could get the answer on population growth, since an officer, Paul, then I won't have to come back. Chair, sorry. Then I won't have to come back. Thank you to all.
Thank you, Tim. Do we have the answer on population growth, or?
I don't
Tim,
have.
if you could remind us of the question.
Perhaps the chief does.
Sorry, I thought there was some anecdotal information our last debate that we hadn't added a sworn officer for feet on the street for about 6 or 8 years. And in that time, we had grown by 65,000 people. I don't know what that source was, but I would like to see it confirmed and documented.
So thanks, Councillor, and through you, Chair. I can provide a little bit of light on that. We had some dialogue with Councillor Cleary on that as well. So we have not had any addition of or a substantial addition of any patrol staff or sworn staff since 2010, save and except when we took on the contract at the airport. And we added additional officers there, but they were part of the airport contract. So they took on brand new roles there and weren't included in what we're doing. I don't have the exact population increase from that time period, but I know that we have been growing substantially. And I believe it was presented in a previous presentation. We're going to see if we can locate that to be able to provide it.
All right. Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Outfit. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for this presentation. You know, I struggle with the fact that we have 2 police services that are only partly integrated. So CID, you know, I've heard from both RCMP and HRP. CID is doing great. Chief, Kinsella, you've just mentioned, you know, that integrated model is doing wonders, you know, for solving crimes. We know that HRP leans on RCMP regularly for support. And works together quite well. What I don't understand is why we continue to operate in silos. So here I am looking at this options over budget, you know, and thank you, Councillor Smith, for putting it on the floor here for consideration. A hate unit detective. Well, we have hate unit detectives, we have sexual assault detectives, we have victim services, we have traffic services. What I don't understand is why they are not integrated. If they were, I mean, RCMP, as has just said, they've come to the table this year without any new FTE asks. And so I'm trying to understand potentially Chief Superintendent Campbell, someone can explain to me why we're not integrated. The CID model is working. So hate crimes, sexual assaults, traffic services, and victim services, if we had integration in those 4 divisions, we'd be much further ahead.
Thank you. Do we have an answer from HRP, RCMP? Go ahead, Chief Kinsella.
Yeah, and through you, Chair, to the Deputy Mayor. I don't know exactly what the question was there, and I might have missed it. If there is one, I'm happy to hear it again.
I can repeat it. What I'm trying to understand is the integrated model of CID is working. You just spoke to it, you know, and saying that is, you know, it is a great model. But what we don't have is an integrated hate crime unit, sexual assault, traffic services, victim services. RCMP already has all of those tools, all of those resources. So I feel like we're paying twice for the same service because we haven't integrated hate crime unit, sexual assault, traffic services, and victim services. So my question is, why is it that here we are in 2022, we've had this model of dual policing for many years, and we still don't have integrated services except for in CID.
So thanks for that clarification, Deputy Mayor, and through you, Chair. So what I did say about CID was that we had over 100 officers assigned to it. The RCMP has a number of officers assigned as well, and that integrated unit serves the entirety of HRM. The SAIT unit is actually integrated within the integrated CID. There currently is no, official. We're getting the hate crime unit going. There's no official hate crime unit within either CID or HRP or in the integrated model of CID. I also know that there has been a further report going to be commissioned, or the CAO would have the details, I think, based on a motion that was put forward, I believe, by Councillor Mancini. So, more to come on the evaluation of, where do we go as a municipality and what is the best way to serve the community. So, that work is, I believe, has been done in the past. I know there was a time when the traffic unit, it was before my time, was integrated with the RCMP. I don't have the history to speak on why it is no longer integrated, but I'm sure we could get that information. And, that's kind of where the state of the union is on the model. The only other thing I would say is this is a very unique model, as we all know. It isn't done anywhere else in the country to this particular extent. So I think it's important that Councillor Mancini has put that motion forward, and that someone will do that work to see, where is the most efficient model moving forward.
Okay, thank you. The RCMP would also like to provide additional information on this, so go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. And I just wanted to make a couple of comments in support of Chief Kinsella and CID. It's very true that the sexual assault unit is an integrated unit over in integrated CID. So that those positions are both RCMP and HRP, and I believe the bulk of them actually might be HRP officers. So I certainly just wanted to make a comment in support of those integrated efforts over to CID. Of course, I can't speak to integrated CID because that's under the chief's purview. But in terms of the hate crimes unit as well, and as I understand it, that would be an integrated position as well, which the rest of the HRM would have access to.
So Chief Superintendent, did you just say that the rest of HRM has access to your hate crime unit? Is that what I just heard?
No, what I was saying is comments in support of Chief Kinsella's last comments, in that the integrated CID, and I don't want to speak to integrated CID, but it's important for me to be able to support that model and the integration of it being sexual assault, or if there is support for hate crimes position, then certainly within integrated CID, the RCMP area would have access to those resources as well. And Chief Kinsella, perhaps you can clarify that, but I just did want to make some supporting comments in relation to that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Campbell. Go ahead, Chief Kinsella.
So thanks, Chair, and through you to the committee. Chief Superintendent Campbell is correct in the hate crime officers that are there, the recently trained and all of that. We would certainly serve all of HRM in that area and look after those investigations.
Thank you very much. Next on the list is Councillor Kent. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm still feeling the effects of yesterday's Board of Police Commissioners meeting. It was a good meeting, lots of great discussion. Not one I anticipated going the way it did, but that's fine. So, but I do feel I'm going to start my comments off with, can I get clarification again from John Traves, our solicitor, on what a next step would look like if a motion came forward of an amendment that would increase this. What was brought from the Board of Police Commissioners. And I tell you why. And I feel compelled to say, follow up with Commissioner Smith's support of Commissioner Chrisley's position around the need for the sexual assault position, and I can't remember the other, but I think one missing piece of that was that motion also included a significant impact on the constables, I believe, that were also being presented by the chief. And it's no surprise to everyone here that I supported the chief's first presentation of the budget for overage, supported it again in our council discussions, and I stand by that. So when Commissioner Critchley's motion came forward with a decrease, I couldn't support it for a lot of reasons, and I don't need to go down that route again today because it's all on record. Having said that, though, I would certainly be happy to support an increase of today's an amendment on the motion if it allows the chief to revisit the potential for those sexual assault investigative team constables and the potential for a victim services caseworker. I'd be happy to do that. And I absolutely, and I've spoken to the chief and in the Board of Police Commission's meetings around the importance of our victim services, the work that I've done in my career in the past that brought me to the sexual assault tables and the domestic violence shelter tables and the services for women in our communities and anyone experiencing trauma and in the needs of victim services. I've had firsthand experience with knowing how important that work is, and I would be happy to support it. When we were looking at the motion that was before Board of Police Commission, for me, it was a lens on how it was being brought forward and the rationale behind it from the chief and his team around trying to change the trajectory of the overtime and the way that he's having to continually sort of pull from here to there, pull members out of their current positions into to backfill, and he wasn't coming to the table with the full extent of really what is needed. And while that's unfortunate, we accepted that, and he found a way forward. So I couldn't support going backwards, but today I'm happy to consider and possibly put an amendment on the floor. But I'm still a little unsure from the solicitor. I feel like he was saying that if we were to amend this motion to include more money to create more FTEs, which in this case potentially, as we've articulated to the chief today and other occasions, potentially a sexual assault team detective constables, would we in fact have to go back to the Board of Police Commission to achieve that today by amending the original motion that is before us, that was from the other day, and then voting on that? Can we do both today without going back to the Board of Police Commissioners? So I'll leave it there for now.
Good. Thank you very much. Go ahead, John.
So, let me come at it for another angle if I may, and if it doesn't answer your question, then you let me know. But here's where we're at today. Assuming the amendment of the main motion passes, right? Then the amended main motion would be on the floor, and it starts out in section 1 with respect to adopting the FTEs that are in slide 7 of the presentation today, because there's no staff report, so it's based on the presentation. That has 12 sworn officers, has other things. That would be subject to a subsequent amendment. But in order to do that, right, leave aside the money because there are financial implications. And in order to do that, I would suggest council would need to give deference to its earlier decision based on Councillor Mancini's motion of a fiscal cap of an additional monies of 1.3 million and the work of the Board of Police. And so I would suggest require a 2/3 vote to effectively increase by adding more bodies into that mix at this point, based on where we're at in the discussions and the earlier direction of the budget committee and the work of the board in terms of saying, look, we've done what you've directed. We've come back with 1.3 million in overs, and here's our recommended piece on it. And if that was the case, and you increase the FTEs, the motion that is there, you will see in number 2, essentially would mean that there would be an ancillary adjustment in the budget to cover the FTEs. And no, I do not believe, based on advice you've received from the Board of Police Commissioners, the direction that's been given, that you would need to go back to the board once again. You have their advice, you have their priorities. But if you wish to, in light of the earlier motion here of 1.3 million as the cap, I would suggest it would need to be a 2/3 vote to make any further adjustments to the manning list that's been presented by the chief and signed off on by the board.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Chair, I just want to add to this. I believe it was Council.
Okay, you are over time. I'm going to ask you to come back.
Okay, I think it's relevant. Yeah, it was relevant. Can I just finish my sentence? It was in relation to the request from Councillor Ohit to get the information from the chief, but the chief already has the information in the very first presentation that we had on the costs associated to the 2 FTEs. So all those positions that were in the first. That's all I ask. I just want to throw that out there. Another report is not required, in my opinion.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kent. Go ahead, Councillor Mancini.
Off mute here. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, colleagues. Interesting discussion. I'm in support of the motion that is on the floor. I feel there are gaps in our service. We have officers on leave for either injury or from mental health issues. It's going to be a big year for the Board of Police Commission after we finish this budget, because the Board of Police Commission is going to be tasked with taking a look at this defund, reimagine report and the 36 action items, and that's going to be a full year's worth of work. And I believe they're going to need some help with staff on that too, which is another subject altogether, so that they can focus on that. And remember too, I think we heard from the RCMP. Next budget is this time next year, they're going to be asking for bodies also for similar reasons. We need to get back to our full complement of community response officers and school liaison officers. We need to get back to that full complement. It's causing problems in our communities and our schools, not having those people at the level they were before. By adding these positions, it's going to allow us to do that. Sure, they can still be pulled away when needed, but there's less chance of that happening. We can now add these 12 officers. We need to get our officers on leave back on the job. Councillor Smith, and I appreciate Councillor Smith's comments about he was disappointed not seeing the victims' service workers or the constable for new sexual assault, and that's the importance. And that was a great discussion as I watched the Board of Police Commission on those positions. And as Councillor Kent just stated, you could add those to today's budget, add that number to today's budget. My preference would be, we need to move on this and we need to decide and support the budget that's on the floor. By supporting this budget, this gets us to a place where the Board of Police Commission can do the work we need to do and really get into the defund and reimagine the police report. So, colleagues, I'm asking you to please support the motion that's on the floor. This is not throwing bodies at the problems because, as identified in the defund report, there's a lot of issues that need to be discussed. Councillor alluded to some of those. We need to get that work started, but we need to add these bodies. We need to have some trust in the leadership of HRP and move forward. So please, I ask colleagues do support the motion. I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mancini. Go ahead, Councillor Mason.
Yeah, I'm just checking in before I decide how I'm voting either way. I'm wondering if staff can give me the details on the callback overtime numbers.
Yes, we have that information now, Councillor, and through you, Chair. My apologies for not having it immediately available. Deputy Chief McCombs will give you callback as it relates to our patrol area, and then I have some information on IES.
Through you, Chair, to Councillor, just for clarity, so I'm answering the right question. Our callback information is broken down into two types of callback. One is callback to fill in patrol vacancies. That's not enough patrol officers working tonight. We have to call people in. The other callback would be people that are called in for major incidents. So a homicide occurs on a weekend and we have to call in forensics and whatnot. That's also callback, but we do have those differentiated.
Yeah, no.
So I'm assuming patrol. Okay. So for the calendar year of 2021, the patrol callback was 1.962 million.
Thank you. And Chief, you had something you wanted to add to that, and then I'll have something to close if you're brief there.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that our callback overtime in IES, which is our dispatchers and call takers, has floated between 220,000 and 380,000 year to year, for an average of about 250,000 a year on callback overtime in IES. And that's all I wanted to add.
You're saying it floats between 200 and 300,000 a year?
Between 220,000 and 380,000. Yeah. So it's been and for an average of about 250.
So council colleagues, committee colleagues, I got to say, I can't support more and I can't support what's in front of us right now, because to me, the number crunching has not gone far enough. That callback to fill in patrol of almost, like literally almost $2 million is enough to create 12 patrol FTEs and still have almost half of it for further overtime. This is exactly what we voted to do with the Halifax Regional Fire and Emergency budget, where we created 10 FTEs from existing overtime positions that were being funded year on year. And that was the right financially appropriate thing to do. So I'm caught between, yes, I absolutely recognize that there are things that we want to do around hate crimes and sexual assault, but Councillor Cuttle made some great points about the cop per pop number. I hate that as an acronym, but that's apparently what we're using. You know, we need more analysis of, you know, what should the right service levels be? Because if we just keep throwing more and more FTEs in there, and we end up having the largest per population police force in the land, which I recognize a lot of what, you know, I don't think the number that we were given by that one report is actually correct, given what we heard about the integrated crime investigation piece. But we haven't done the service standards yet. And we also have $1.96 million in callback overtime. So to me, it's financially irresponsible to not use some of that money to reduce the amount of the increase that HRP is asking for. So I won't be supporting the motion on the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Mason. Go ahead, Councillor Daigle-Gammon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for the great conversations here. Building a little bit on where Councillor Mason was with his comments, it's a challenge to say the over budget. It's all about FTEs. And I guess I really wonder, well, first one point is just no new sworn officers, but there's been a significant increase in non-sworn officers though. So we have seen some increase in the personnel there. Where Councillor Outhid spoke about the sexual assault positions may be coming under the public safety officer, that was something I was also really interested in, and thinking, where can the current organization of HRM be able to use existing positions and resources and talent in the support of the HRP? So when you think about, we need to get officers back to work, I do wonder what's happening within the disability program, what we've got an HR department within with HRM. So is there a place there that we can see some economies and some value of using our staff well that way? So yeah, so adding bodies doesn't seem to me to be the answer. And I also struggle with the math, figuring out how this can work in the way that it does. So I probably won't, unless I hear something in the next little while. I'm not in a place where I could support this. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Daigle-Gammon. Go ahead, Councillor Query.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and colleagues. Just to follow up on what Councillor Mason was talking about and what our solicitor, John Traves, was talking about maybe an hour ago. In terms of council providing the police force and therefore the number of officers. So could HRP just go hire, using its callback 1.9 million, just go hire more officers without council approving an increase in sworn FTEs?
Thanks, Councillor, and through you, Chair. I'm going to defer to Mr. Blackwood on this, other than to say we don't have all of that money in our budget for callback. For overtime callback. It's not budgeted for that. We do have a budget for overtime for the other types of callback, investigative, all those other things, and for overtime in general. But we don't have that amount of money in the budget to cover what we're spending. So I'll just defer to to Jerry if he has anything to add that's different than that.
Thank you, Chief. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, just Mr. Chair, through you to the councillor. So the Police Act provides simply that the police department shall, which is mandatory, consist of a chief officer and such other members, special constables, bylaw enforcement officers, and civilian employees as the council, after consultation with the board, may from time to time determine. So and those are a long-term commitment. Employees, are an annual charge to the base, and council has to raise funds for that. So no, I would suggest that the HRP is not free to simply hire redirecting other budgetary funds.
So, and that was where I thought we were. So to Councillor Mason's point, even if the chief did have that $2 million just sitting around, he couldn't actually go and hire them and use that, in quote, savings to hire them without us. So, I mean, he says he does, it's not a slush fund that's just kicking around that he can pick up and use anyway. So Councillor Mason's point doesn't make any sense in terms of it's not available cash, and they can't go hire new people without us approving them hiring new people. And if it turns out that they have savings, then this increase wouldn't cost us as much as what is budgeted for. So, if we look at the 2011 census, because I don't have 2010 accurate data, but from StatsCan, there were 390,000 people living in HRM. In 2022 today, we have about 450,000 people living in HRM. So we've increased our population by about 60,000. And to the chief's point, except for the contract with the airport, which those police officers are dedicated to, there hasn't been an increase in sworn officers since 2010. So in real terms, and not accounting for the number of officers that are off on sick leave or other types of leave, we've actually had a real decline in officer per population, sworn officer per population. And under federal and provincial legislation, there are certain things that only a sworn officer, a peace officer, can do. To Jacques' point earlier, it would require a fair bit of analysis and investigation to see if things like sexual assault could be covered by a civilian person out of public safety. And I'm not sure that, without changes provincially and federally, that would be possible anyway. So in the short term, And what the sense that I'm getting is we all support a retasking and detasking of police. But we also can't cut our nose to spite our face. We need to stand up an adequate and efficient police force in order for our citizens, our residents, to be safe. And between now and when we can hive off, the easy low-hanging fruit like crossing guards, when we can stand up some sort of civilian mental health unit, when we can stand up maybe sexual assault officers, if that's possible in civilian form, then it behooves us to actually make sure we have a police force that can adequately provide public safety for Halifax. So I'm certainly supportive of this compromise where we've landed today. And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Cleary. Go ahead, Councillor Cuddle.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Yeah, so I just want to say that I appreciate Chief Kinsella's assessment of how difficult it is to calculate police officers on a per capita basis when we look at Halifax Regional Municipality. We are by far the largest regional municipality in Canada. So there's not a lot of comparisons. But I do think when we take down the geographical service area and the number of police officers and, look between what is contracted to the RCMP and what's the responsibility of the HRP, we can come up with some numbers. And if they're not right, then perhaps we have to do a little bit of a deeper dive into what an actual efficient and effective police force is. I am not anti-police. I actually believe they have a really important role to play in community safety, public safety, major crime, major incidents. We need an efficient and effective police force. I just don't know what that is. And what I can't support is just growth for growth's sake. To say that, we've grown this much over time and we haven't added new sworn officers, but I don't know what the ideal number is. And nobody's been able to provide that for us. So, that leaves a big question mark in my head around, one, what is effective? What do we need to be effective? What does that look like? And what's efficient? And, back to when we look at this presentation and we look at the request for 12 new full-time employees, is to deal with an absenteeism issue. But yet we're not directly talking about that. And we don't hear the plan for how we're going to address that and solve that problem. I think that's critically important. So, I think there's two pieces here. One is changes, we're being, if we look at the context within which we're operating, we have this external pressure on defunding, retasking the police, a real call from the community for a different type of police force. Don't know what the strategy is right now for how we're transitioning there, but I know the report is in, and that's going to be a lot of work over the next year, and I look forward to seeing the results of that. I think internally, there's also some calls for changes. If we have a chronic issue, I have no idea right now if that issue has been like this for many years, if it's been growing recently, if it's been declining, because I don't have the data. And so I can't support throwing money and more people at a problem when I don't even understand what the end goal is and what we're trying to get to. So that's why I will not be supporting this amendment. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Cuddle. Councillor Austin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just had to convince my family here to mute the TV so that you're not also catching the kids' cartoons in this limited accommodation. So I wanted just to ask a little bit more about the callback overtime piece, because I'm not sure I entirely followed it. So my first question, that 1.9 million, I think the figure was, that is what the cost was for callback overtime for patrol. Yes?
It's correct. Yes, that's correct, Councillor.
Thank you. And so that number isn't currently in your budget?
We have not that 1.9 for callback. So I'm going to ask Mr. Horton to just come in and comment. We don't have that amount budgeted for that type of callback. So that's where we're at. The reason that it's in the state that it is because we're filling vacancies and those kind of things offset. All of this was reported at the third quarter report at the Board of Police Commissioners, but I will ask Mr. Horton to provide a little more context there, so nobody leaves with any misunderstandings.
Thank you, Chief. Chair, through you to the counselor. The overtime budget for Halifax Regional Police in 2021-22 fiscal was $2,461,300. So the number that Deputy McCombs provided for callback, I believe, was 1.9 million for the calendar year of 2021. So we're comparing a full year, but not the same months, right? But to give you a sense, that's well over half of what our overtime budget is. We reported on the third quarter financial report that our overtime would be approximately 3 million over the budget that it is now. And a lot of that was offset by savings in competent salaries and benefits for positions that are vacant or positions that we're not paying the individuals because they're on WCB or whatnot. To fund the positions, the service enhancements that were recommended today, the $1,365,000 would be a significant, if we were to reduce our overtime by that amount, we would be reducing it over half.
The budgeted.
The budgeted of our budgeted overtime.
So if I can ask, is there been any calculation at all to account for, I mean, presumably there'd be some savings in overtime, even if it's not the full amount. Has that been factored in to the budget at all? Because if not, and if council were to not approve these 12, wouldn't we be approving a budget that would be already baked in as over budget if it hasn't been budgeted for, like some sort of overtime for this?
The intention based on our forecasting for overtime in the current fiscal year, we're hoping that we can bridge that gap of how much we're overspent in overtime right now to bring it back in line with our budget amount of overtime. I don't know if I hope that answers your question.
I just feel like I'm struggling here because I feel like there's something missing because, if these 12 are a service enhancement and you had to prepare a budget that was based on not having these 12, presumably you've had to factor in some sort of overtime for the fact that you're going to be calling people back for patrol or trying to fill those positions by your existing, officers. If we're hiring these, if council approves hiring these 12, then presumably there would have to be some sort of reduction in the overtime budget. And so I can't figure out like how it could be factored for in one scenario, but then not have any impact in the other, right? I don't know if that helps at all.
Chairman, through you to the counselor, we're trying to get our overtime back down to the budgeted level. We're significantly overspent or forecasted to be significantly overspent this fiscal year. So the premise of these additional positions will help reduce that callback overtime, get us back down to the current budget level for overtime that we're at. There hasn't been a significant increase in our overtime budget for several years. And in fact, when we were in the COVID year, I believe it was 2020-21, we did reduce our overtime budget by about 500,000 to help with those, those significant cuts that had to be made. And operationally, things were done to reduce the amount of overtime.
Okay, I'm going to jump in because our ruthless chair will cut me off as I write out my notes. So
you have run out of time. Is this
Can
reiterating
I
that
ask
same.
one more question and I will go away, Mr. Chair?
You're at just about 6 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry. Thank you, Sam. Go ahead, Mr.
Sorry, was that me, Chair?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. So just a question for all of us. If this doesn't pass, this motion doesn't pass, that takes us back to the original motion that was put on the floor from the first Board of Police Commissioners. That's correct?
Yes, it is.
So we would have to vote on
Full
that.
increase.
Pardon me?
With the full increase requested by the board.
But there was overs though. Those were overs, weren't they?
They were part of the recommendation from the board. And so it's a full up.
So the overs are all included. So that's what. So I'm very comfortable, reasonably comfortable, supporting what's on the floor. To me, there's a lot of work that's gone into this. We've discussed this at this table. The Board of Police Commissioners have discussed it twice. The Board of Police Commissioners came back with the number that we gave them, the 1.3 or whatever it was, over and above the original budget. Not all of the overs that they asked for. And it's come back to us. There is a lot of work that's happening in policing these days. The chief and his team are working hard on this, and the Board of Police Commissioners is doing a lot of work to look at, where policing is going. From my point of view, I can support what's on the floor. I think it takes us where we need to go, and there are some gaps that we've talked about that we can look at over time. We haven't had big increase in sworn officers. It's true. We have had significant increase in non-sworn staff of the police commission, of the police service. I think that the work that they do is awfully important to us. I think that these new officers will allow them to do better. It's not everything the police wanted, but it's not everything, but it's not nothing. And so to me, this has shown a lot of work. This is what council is supposed to do. It's supposed to look at these issues, come up with it, make some recommendations. We all feel somewhat encumbered by the legislation of how it has to go back to police, and we can't say take this and this. We can only give an envelope number. I think the work that's gone into this takes us to a place where I can live with, and that I think is at this point in time is a good solution. So I want to thank the Board of Police Commissioners who put a lot of time into this over the last little while. I appreciate their work, and I'll support what's on the floor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Go ahead, Councilor Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I'm a little confused with Mr. Traves has said, which doesn't take much to confuse me, as you guys know. But anyhow, the mayor asked if the motion that's on the floor right now is what the Board of Police Commissions brought forward, including the positions that we talked about, 1.3 and change. If that motion is lost today, we go back to the original motion and recommendation from the Board of Police Commission on the very first day we discussed this. But that motion does not include the 9 positions the chief had asked me over. Is that correct?
Chair, to you, to the councillor, no.
Right.
Because the way that the budget was presented by the Board of Police as an entirely, a pot of money as a budget and indicating how they were going to spend it, it included all the overs. That was the recommendation. So the entirety of the request, including overs, was what was recommended by the Board of Police Commissioners at the outset. So that's the motion on the floor, right? We don't treat the police budget as overs. It's a total envelope, as you recall, in terms of what they bring forward.
So just to clarify, the chief asked for 2.9 million.
Correct.
And so we vote what's on the floor now, then that gets approved with including his 2.9 million.
No.
That's what
No.
That's what I mean.
If the amended motion that's on the floor now passes, it will be based on the full-time equivalent positions that are in slide 7. It will meet the 1.3 roughly $1 million that council directed. So that's why it's an amendment of the main motion. So it would essentially end up with FTEs that are equivalent to $1.365 million. as the increase above the base budget. So you've got the base budget there as well, right? Is that, have I confused you further, or does that help?
Again, so the chief, if it gets approved, we know what the chief has. He has his additional positions he talked about today. If it doesn't get approved, he doesn't have those additional positions.
If this amendment doesn't get approved, then we are back to the deferred motion, which was the base budget together with 2.9 million or whatever it was increase. And so you either approve that or send it back to the board again with an additional amount. I
understand, John. Sorry to interrupt, but my time is going to be up here. So that means, well, if this gets turned down, we have to vote on that 2.9.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's where.
Yeah,
quick question for the chief, if I may. Then, Chief, can you speak to the other? We've been talking about the 12 officers, which are extremely important. But can you speak to the emergency communications positions, please? I heard you speak to that at the Board of Police Commission and the importance of what you're doing, because I don't want folks to forget about the need to support our 911 operators. And the 911 operators are not just dispatching police, they're dispatching fire and EHS and all that. And there's a gap there. And you asked originally for 8 officers. So you're coming back with 3 part-time and 1, right, you asked for 8 operators, and you're coming back with 3 part-time operators and 1 full-time supervisor. So Chief, can you speak to the importance of that and why that's important to Phil? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yes, and thank you, Councillor, and through you, Chair, to the committee. So very important comments, and I appreciate them. Our IES call takers and dispatchers really are the front line, and there's such a great support, not only taking in the calls from many stakeholders, but also providing great support, particularly at the dispatch level, for both the HRP and the RCMP. And this ask really falls into 2 categories, as you mentioned: 3 part-time call takers and 1 supervisory resource. And what's driving the need is essentially related to the main argument that we have made throughout the budget. And it is really to fill our most critical capacity gaps while supporting members with issues that come with overtime, fatigue, and overwork. The combination of these IES resources provides us flexibility of deployment and also some additional capacity to deliver additional ongoing education and training, evaluation of new hires, and we can also monitor performance. Currently, supervisors are often having to replenish capacity of the frontline call taker staff on a fairly regular basis. They got to sit in for them because we don't have enough people sitting in the chairs and doing the important work that they do. And I mentioned earlier in IES, we've had overtime in the incurrence of between 220 and 380,000 over the last 6 years. The dispatch function is truly where the police response begins. And it is critical that the issues related to the IES receive the attention in this budget. One of the things that we do have the flexibility, and the question was asked earlier about, part-time police officers, we don't have that ability within our working agreements with the various unions. We do have that ability here, this gives us the flexibility basically to hold us over and reassess. There's been a lot of talk about reassessing what we need. I asked for 8. I've come back with this alternative that is going to help us fill the gaps, and we're going to go back to the table and reevaluate, not only in this area, but every area, to make sure that we deliver on our policing needs.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mancini. Go ahead, Councillor Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to pick up where I was before. So what I've heard is the overtime budget, the goal is to get it down because it hasn't been increased. It's been a pressure point for the department for a while. These 12 officers will help with that, but because the overtime budget has been pressed, there's not really any savings to be had in doing that. So my question is to go back to before the enhancement budget, the original department created budget before the Board of Police Commission, voted for the first batch of enhancements. That original budget, was there a structural deficit there in terms of overtime to begin with? Because the original budget didn't include any enhancements. So presumably that overtime pressure would have been there.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor, and that is a good question. And I've got Mr. Horton listening intently along with Deputy McCombs to see if there's anything that needs to be added to the response. So we always have an overtime budget, which we've talked about, and I think you've summed it up fairly well there. The original ask was multifaceted, right? And it will help us with overtime, but that's not the driver. If it was simply as easy as saying, you know, we're forecasted to be 3 million over in our overtime for this year. If it was simply as easy as saying, if I have this extra 3 million, I can meet my overtime needs. The bigger problem that we have is being able to sustain these call-ins, this impact on our members. Also, the services that we are taking away in the community, in the schools, on our traffic roadways, that's the piece that we're trying to break the cycle on. And that is where we're trying to head. This is really a response, in my view, you know, we put it together, so I'm going to obviously support it. This is a very responsible way to proceed. We've been back and forth with the board, we've been back and forth with council, and we've brought forward what we believe under the new limit, the 1.365. You actually offered 1.393. We came in at 1.365. We're trying to do a holistic look at where we are going and where we're headed. So my prediction would be that the overtime that isn't budgeted is going to need to be spent to call in the officers to come and do the work, or pull the officers from their other areas. But at some point in time, we're not going to be able to get those people to come in. And we're already seeing that on some basis, because people need a work-life balance. So, and I've been through this. We've had extensive conversations in camera, and we've gone over all the information. And I think that we are, doing the very best that we can for efficiencies and everything else, and we'll continue to work on it. And if it is the will of council to have us go back and work with the board and consult with the board again, then but I think we are in a good spot going forward, and I think we've presented all the information that we could.
Thank you, Chief. Just to kind of to wrap up this conversation, I mean, I think on my end, and I think Councillor Mason sounds like he's in a similar place. I find it difficult just where, we've had other departments that come in with these challenges. Fire department, we did a thing with planning and parking enforcement where, if you give us X, then we can produce Y. And I find it challenging that we can't seem to get to an answer in terms of the police department about, if you give me more officers, will be the impact in overtime. I don't expect it to pay for itself completely, but I would think there would be some sort of impact there. And if there's no impact there, which is what I'm hearing, then that suggests to me that the original budget was out of whack from the very get-go. And so I just, I don't mean to be rude, but I feel like there's a lack of rigor that's been put through on this, either in the department or at the police commission, because this, I just can't. One of the two has to be the case is kind of where I am, and I'm not sure I'm going to get this resolved in just asking questions here, in our committee of the whole. So I think I will let it go for now, but I find this somewhat dissatisfying. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Austin. Go ahead, Councillor Smith.
Here, I just have to put an amended motion.
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I had to put an amended motion for number 2 from earlier, that the board, the budget committee direct chief administrative officer to prepare the Halifax Regional Police 22-23 budget and business plan as approved by the Board of Police Commissioners BOPC on January 31st, 2022, and amended on March 9th, 2022, subject to regional council approval of any increase in FTEs.
So that is seeking an amendment of the amendment that we are currently talking about.
Yeah. So this is I don't know exactly what.
I see John waving, and
this is from staff.
Go ahead, John.
The original that was posted by Councillor Smith didn't include the March 9th reference. So it's essentially clarifying that the amendment motion on the floor is number 2 that's placed there. It was simply a typo. So we want to make sure that we get it right.
It is correcting a typo as opposed to, okay.
Yeah, we're not looking to amend the amendment. You can't do that, but certainly that was amended.
That's where I
March
went.
9th. It does exactly the same as what Councillor Smith moved in the first place.
A friendly non-amendment amendment.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Want to get it straight for the record.
We all
So we don't
took
need to
breath on
vote on
that
the
one.
non-amendment amendment that is, okay. Thank you, Councillor Smith, for bringing that forward. You have another couple of minutes if you would like to.
No, I'll just
You're
leave
done?
it. I'll just leave it
Okay.
there.
You'll just leave it there. Thank you. So correcting that typo, so the question has been called. There are no further speakers in the list. This is on the amended motion that was in the chat that includes the original motion plus the updates from the March 9th meeting, as we saw in the Board of Police Commissioners. So
sorry, Chair.
The question has been called. Ian, it's over to you. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Councillor Smith.
I just want, because I've heard a little bit, and it just is a potential that it could fail. So before we do that, just really quickly, can we just have that clarification of what happens if this motion fails, and then where we're at? Because I know there's been some conversation since we last got that, so I just want to make sure that we're all clear.
Go ahead, John.
A great question, because there's been a lot going on. So number one, I would urge you, no matter what your view is on the police budget, to pass this amendment. And then if you wish to see subsequent changes down or up, that we could deal with it on the basis of an amended motion, first and foremost, whatever your view. If this passes and your view is you do not wish to see any overs or increases beyond the base budget, then you would vote down number 1 in this amended main motion and support number 2, which is the base budget. It's been separated out, all right, in terms of it, because it's based on FTEs. I'll leave that alone. If the amendment that's being proposed from the Board of Police, based on the direction from the Budget Committee to come in at $1.3 million fails, then the deferred motion from our last meeting remains on the floor, which is to say the base budget together with the 2.9 increase that the board originally recommended. At that point, council will then have to deal with the main motion by either voting in favor of it, defeating it, or deferring once again and sending it back to the Board of Police Commissioners to make a change in terms of, and by providing with them direction as to do an additional change. You can avoid that process by passing this amendment. And then if you wish to make any other changes, we can debate those, provided there's a 2/3, in favor of any subsequent changes. Clear as mud.
I have a quick question,
Clear as mud.
clarification.
Go ahead, Councillor Cuddle, and then Councillor Purdy after you. Go ahead, Councillor Cuddle.
That's part of the debate, by the way.
John,
There is no such thing as a question of clarification.
I'm sorry. Hold.
Point of order. With that.
We have not moved to the vote yet, so a question of clarification, and she was the first person that I saw there in the list to be able to speak. Go ahead, Councillor Cuddle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering where we would, you say if we pass this, we can go back and debate it. Where would we debate that? Any other changes? Where would that happen?
Thank you for the question. So what you are doing is voting essentially on an amendment to the main motion. So we're taking the main motion that's still on the floor. This would effectively amend it, shape it around a different way. So the main motion is then, as amended, still on the floor and open for further debate in terms of, or if we're finished, then you can call for the question on the amended motion. So, but if there was a desire subsequent to this, if council is not satisfied with, the amended motion, which includes the base budget and 1.3 million as per slide 7 of of increases or cost to FTEs, then certainly you could test, your fellow members of council to see if there's an additional change upwards or downwards in terms of what's been presented on the FTEs
In this meeting here or in a subsequent meeting?
in this meeting.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, John. Thank you, Councillor Cuddle. Go ahead, Councillor Purdy.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This has been a very educational conversation, so thank you. I just want to please let's pass this. Chief Kinsella has said over and over again, this is more than just the money. This is more than just the money. This is about the mental health and support of officers. They are run down and run ragged, and there are obviously other issues here that need to be addressed, yes, but right now there is a crisis. And so this would help alleviate some of the pressure so that they can start dealing with the other issues like absenteeism and trying to get officers back to work and all the other stuff. When you are in crisis, you can't really deal with things properly. You're just trying to fill the gaps, and you can't look at the big picture. So let's help them look at the big picture and do this. It's a Band-Aid for now, and then the commission has a big job ahead of them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Purdy. We have no further speakers on the list. Are we ready for the question?
Question.
The question has been called. Ian, it's over to you.
Beginning with District 4, Councillor Purdy.
Voting yes.
5, Councillor Austin.
No.
6, Councillor Mancini.
Sorry, yeah, that's a yes, please.
7, Councillor Mason.
No.
8, Councillor Smith. Again? Sorry, Councillor, was that against? Yes, again, thank you. 9, Councillor Clary.
Yes.
10, Councillor Morse.
Against.
11, Councillor Cuddle.
Against.
12, Councillor Stoddard.
Against the motion.
13, Deputy Mayor Lovelace.
Voting no.
14, Councillor Blackburn.
Voting in favor of the motion.
15, Councillor Russell.
In favor?
16, Councillor Outhit.
Voting yes.
Mayor Savage.
Yes.
1, Councillor Daigle Gammon.
Voting no.
2, Councillor Hensby.
Affirmative.
And 3, Councillor Kent.
In favor.
Ian, I did not catch Councillor Cleary's vote, so I have an 8-8 tie, not knowing about Councillor Cleary's vote.
I have Councillor Cleary as a vote in the affirmative. I have it
So
as
that makes it 9-8.
I have a 9-8 vote in favor.
That matches my records. Thank you very much. That motion passes. Thank you very much. So this is now the motion on the floor. We are back to discussing the full amended motion. Councillor Morse is the next person on my list. I will post that in the chat momentarily, but go ahead, Councillor Morse.
I wasn't planning to speak, actually, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. The next person on my list then is Councillor Smith.
Good.
You're good. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll withdraw. Thank you.
You, Councillor Cleary, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just as we continue our budget process, and especially for future budgets, as we get into discussions about department spending, I think it'll be interesting to see who asks questions of like, what is our librarian per population ratio and what is our pothole filler per population ratio? And I think given the current political climate, I understand why people are asking it about police, but I'm not sure if we actually are concerned about service levels. Why are we aren't asking it about every other department that we have and seeing if we can find relevant data from across the country to see if we're fully staffed up in Parks and Rec or if we're fully staffed up in other areas. So just something for my colleagues to consider.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Cleary. I will certainly be asking that about fire. Go ahead, Councillor Cuttle.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think we do ask that about other departments. When we look at libraries, we look at national averages, where we are with our book collection, our libraries per population. We do that with, Parks and Rec as well. We've been doing that pretty much with every business unit, trying to figure out where as a municipality do we stand against, in comparison and contrast to other cities of similar sizes. And, the discussion about the difficulties in doing that in a regional municipality like ours is something that, we continue to talk about. But that being said, I pretty much said everything I needed to say on the amendment. So I'm done now and we can move on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cuttle. We have no further speakers on the list. Are we ready for the question on the motion?
Mr. Chair, Councillor Kent was kicked out of the Teams. Can you hold on till she gets back in, please?
That's fair. Thank you very much. At this point, we're simply waiting for Councillor Kent. How are we doing as far as the rest of quorum?
What's Councillor Smith's notice there about a motion after this main motion? Is that previously?
This is sorry, Chair, I'll just jump in. This is a motion for the budget adjustment that's related to the police commission that just wasn't put on the floor during our last discussion. This came from the Board of Police Commissioners. But it just wasn't added to the ballot at our first meeting. So this is related to the police budget meeting for the ballot that came from the Board of Police Commissioners meeting. And I'll put it in the chat just so folks can see it.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, this is Councillor Kent. Can you hear me?
We can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, so I'm on my phone. I can't seem to get in from my desktop and I cannot see you guys. I can see you guys, but you can't see me, but I'm good with that. So can someone just give me a sense of what's on the floor for the motion that's being debated right now?
Nothing. We are just, we are about to vote on the main motion.
Which was the original, the base plus 2.9.
No, sorry.
Sorry, plus
the main motion
1.36.
has.
Sorry, yeah, the amended motion, base plus 1.36 million.
Exactly.
Correct.
Yeah, okay, okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. So Ian, we have no further speakers on that main motion, so it's over to you.
Just to clarify, Mr. Chairman, this additional motion that's in the chat, is that also, it's not being added to the budget, it's going to be added to the ballot, so we have a further discussion later. So it's not part of this budget motion. Okay, thank you.
No,
it is not a part of this budget motion.
No, it is.
No. Wait a minute.
Okay.
This is a two-part motion. The first is to approve the increase in FTE, to recommend to council to improve the increase in FTEs that are on slide 5 of the presentation by the chief this morning, or sorry, this afternoon. And secondly, that the CAO be directed to prepare the police budget and business plan as approved with that increase in it. So this is the police budget in its entirety. It does not go to the ballot for another discussion because it's an all-encompassing budget. As you recall, we don't send it back, it's either you accept the police budget or not. So this is done for the police budget. It will go to the overall budget.
But I think, Mr. Chair, if I may, I think Councillor Hensby is asking about the item that Councillor Smith just put on. Is that what you're asking about? That's not included in what we're voting on now.
No, that's what I'm trying to figure. Is this an additional motion for the ballot?
Councillor Smith
But-
has posted an additional motion for the budget adjustment list that is unrelated to the main motion on the police. It is not on the floor. It has not been moved. It has not been seconded at this time.
Should have been put on the floor. It's caused confusion.
To be dealt with subsequent to the main motion.
You have it, David? I understand it's confusion.
Got it now.
And-
We'll
and
have further clarification when we get to this additional motion later.
Which is why it would make sense to discuss and debate one motion at a time. Ian, it's over to you for calling the roll on the amended motion that we have on the floor at this point.
Speaking to the main motion, beginning with District 5, Councillor Austin.
Against.
6, Councillor Mancini.
Voting in favor of the motion.
7, Councillor Mason.
Against.
8, Councillor Smith.
Against.
9, Councillor Cleary.
Yes.
10, Councillor Morse.
Against.
11, Councillor Cuttle.
Against.
12, Councillor Stoddard.
Against the motion?
13, Deputy Mayor Lovelace.
Voting no.
14, Councillor Blackburn.
Voting in favor of the motion.
15, Councillor Russell.
In favor?
16, Councillor Outhead.
Yes.
Mayor Savage.
In favor?
1, Councillor Daigle Gammon.
Voting against the motion.
2, Councillor Hensby.
Affirmative.
3, Councillor Kent.
In favor.
And 4, Councillor Purdy.
Voting in favor.
I have 9 to 8 in favor. Ian, does that concur?
Chair
Or does
Smith-
that match
Chair-
your,
Chair Russell,
okay,
that is
so
the same
that-
vote that I have as well.
great, thank you very much, Ian. So that motion passes. We now have an amended, we now have a police budget. Go ahead, Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Chair. And as I wrote in the chat, this motion is after the main motion. So I hope that I can in the future provide even more clarity when I bring things further. So I'll read the motion and then speak to it really quickly. And Ian, really quickly, mine's a little bit different than the one that you posted. Which one should I be reading?
I've converted yours into a recommendation from Budget Committee. The one that you have is a recommendation from Board of Police. So the one that I posted will have Budget Committee being the one providing the direction.
Okay, thank you. I move that the Budget Committee include 100,000 in additional funding costs associated with provide staffing for the Board of Police Commissioners within the proposed 22-23 Halifax Regional Police proposed budget and the budget adjustment list as an operating over budget option for consideration.
I'll second that, Mr. Chair. Oh.
Seconded, I think, by Councillor Kent. Go ahead, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, just really quickly, I think we just need to add a providing. That's why I struggled for a moment. So if that can just be corrected. Really, so just again, really quickly, this comes from the Board of Police Commissioners understanding the work, the work that's being done with the commission. You know, we saw with the Wortley report how important it was for the Board of Police Commissioners to not only meet on a regular basis on our regular schedule, but the importance of us working with outside community members, with outside bodies, with standing committees, with you name it. The Wortley report really showed that the Board of Police Commissioners is not just a body that meets on scheduled days. And we're seeing as the Board of Police Commissioners progress with being more involved in wanting to support and help look at how we do policing within HRM. We see that we're having more special meetings, which means that we need more time from our staff who are already ran flat off their feet, and we appreciate everything they do. Andrea and Ian, we appreciate you, and our Ian's our municipal clerk, and he's helping support Board of Police Commission meetings and other legislative stuff as well, which I know he has a whole team he could be helping as well. So with saying that, that's just the administrative aspect of the Board of Police Commissioners. Then there's also the work aspect. So we're asking for more reports. We're asking for more research. We're asking for more information from our chief, which means that he has to ask for more information from his staff and his supports. All that to say is that the commission just doesn't have the resources needed to answer all the questions and do all the work that we want to do outside of our meetings and within our meetings with the resources we have today. And we're trying our best, but we're really getting to a point where it's showing it not on the staffing end, but it's also showing with the commissioners. These are all volunteers as well, and they're spending a lot of time and a lot of extra time when we're trying to do this work. So hopefully this motion, if it's approved, that when we have our discussion on the budget adjustment list, would allow us to start to prepare to really get to a place where the commission has the resources needed. And other municipalities have like staff, executive directors who run their Board of Police Commission meeting. I can bring that information later. So it's really to help provide the supports needed. And when we get to the ballot list, I'll speak a little bit more in detail on this as well. But I hope we can support it and move it forward.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Smith. Councillor Kent is having difficulties entering things into the chat because she's on her phone. So we are going to go to Councillor Mason and then Councillor Hensby and then Councillor Kent and then proceed with the rest of the list as you have entered it. So go ahead, Councillor Mason.
I support this 100%. I'm so glad to see this here. I thank Councillor Smith and Chair Smith in both his roles for this. My time on the Board of Police Commissioners and going to the provincial and national police governance conferences showed me that we're not alone in struggling to better define and support our police commission in exercising its statutory duty. One of the lines that we adopted when I was on the board about the independence and jurisdiction policy of the police board is that the board's purpose in part is to preserve policing independence from political interference while ensuring civilian oversight over the extraordinary powers of the police. It's huge, and it hasn't been done adequately. And I will say that even about when I was on the board, and it's not putting anybody down who's on there now, it's an evolving process. But there are people who have powers in our society and carry sidearms and are authorized to use force the rest of us are not allowed to use and are extremely well trained to do so. And the oversight of them is through this board, not through council. And I think we need to take some extraordinary steps. I think this could be one of the most important things that comes out of this budget is to ensure the independence and adequate resourcing of this board to do that job. So I support this 100%, and I ask council to support that, this good work. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mason. Go ahead, Councillor Hensby.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I want a clarification. So what Councillor Mason just said kind of solidified is it's administrative support for the commission and not for staffing of more officers. It's more of an administrative support for the work of the commission. My question though would be is what autonomy would this staff have in regards to should they not be accountable to the clerk's office or should they, or through our public safety office? I understand this need to help the police commission with its duties and stuff in regards to the administrative functions and public meetings and more engagement, especially with COVID coming out of the COVID coverage and stuff. Anticipate there's going to be more expectations of the commission, especially with his defund or detask or whatever you want to call the recommendations of the report. They're going to have more engagement, more support, more, audio, doing the setting up of public meetings and stuff like that. So my question is, how autonomous would the staff be? Or would they be a part of the clerk's office or be a part of our public safety office? That's the question I have in regards to where would they fit in the scope of the municipal workforce?
Go ahead, Jacques.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure if I'm responding in the right order here. Perhaps Councillor Smith and Chair Smith has a view on this. He and I discussed this, and there was some discussion about this at the Board of Police Commissioners. So The supplemental sheet that will come back will basically socialize where we think that might be. The conversations we've had internally have been associated with putting this person under GRIA, and would not be reporting to Amy Siciliano, but it would certainly be part of GRIA reporting up as have it separated from the clerk's office, have it separated from HRP and the RCMP completely. Sort of an objective. This is a policy position, as I understand it. We need to do. There's a fair bit of research that the board wants to do, particularly around board policy. So this is kind of a policy position, as I understood the conversation. And Lindell or Councillor Smith may want to correct me on that, but my understanding is that's where we're going with this. This would be part of, it'll be an add-on to the CAO's budget, GRIA, and have that person as a policy support person to the board. Because right now, there really is nobody on staff or within HRP that is actually providing policy work, policy options to the board. So that was sort of the conversation, unless I missed something. Thank you.
Clarify that then.
Thank you, Jacques.
Would that be a contract position or a higher position with municipal benefits?
It would be a higher position with municipal benefits. So we have a policy shop now in GRIA, and that's basically where much of our corporate policy work happens, social policy, etc. So this would be an additional resource, but assigned to the Board of Police Commissioners and doing work exclusively, for the most part, for the Board of Police Commissioners, but would also tie back to some of the policy work we're doing across the public safety realm as well, right? But it'd be a linkage there to public safety and all that. But it's a full-time permanent resource.
Thank you, Jacques. Go ahead, John.
So partly this is for Jacques, but Mr. Chair, through the committee, it might make sense based on the CEO's comments then that rather than those monies being placed in the proposed 22-23 HRP budget, that they go in the CAO's office's budget, which is kind of what I understood was being the discussion anyway, Jacques. And if that's fine, and that would potentially deal with the conflict piece. I think I just heard Councillor Hensby raise.
Yeah, look, I'm glad you raised that because I think the motion should be changed to reflect that, assuming that the Chair Smith is in agreement with that. Because it's really, that was my recollection of the conversation. It would not be placed within the HRP budget, rather the CAO's budget, to have some independence on the police budget and HRP and the RCMP writ large, right?
And if need be, when it comes back in the BAL discussion, then you'll see that in the note in terms of the discussions that come from here. But I would suggest a friendly amendment just to change that over.
So if the chair of the Police Commission and Councillor Smith, the same one is in favor of that, I'll support the amendment.
Yeah, I'm in favor, and that's something I missed too. So in favor of that change, friendly.
Good. Thank you, Councillor Smith. Thank you, Councillor Hensby. And if you could put the revised chat, thank you very much. The revised motion in the chat, as you have just done. Councillor Kent.
Thank you. Oh, hang on.
She's on two devices.
Yeah, sorry about that. I was just at that point where I had my phone on and I managed to get back in. So thanks and my apologies. I appreciate this motion more than you will know. I think that as we go into this next journey of policing and society, and we this council, and with all the competing factors that are in the policing services narrative across the country, this kind of support is more critical than ever. We are still working through the Wortley report. We have missing and murder Indigenous women that, we still have policing perspectives and approaches that we have to take into consideration very carefully. We have had recent events in Ottawa. We have the global unrest. We have, of course, the defunding and retasking and report that we have to unpack and create a path forward. And this is a really pivotal piece. And I would agree with Councillor Mason's perspective on one of the most important pieces of this budget. I appreciate the words that I've heard so far. I hope that all of council can get behind this. This board is, I think we're all determined, this commission, we're all determined to go down this path. Commissioner Critchley put a motion on the table, and I think that's the beginning of a number of them. But each of these deep dives and each of this conversation that we need to be part of has to be as well part of the national narrative that's happening here in Canada. We need to be players in these big forums. I did agree to attend the conference that will be in Saskatoon this year, and I'm so grateful that we now have the ability to do that in person, because I think that it's one thing to do a webinar, it's another to be in completely invested in conversations around the table. So the research, and yes, we had talked at the commission level around it being research, and equally important around the capacity of the staff to support us administratively, not off the side of their desk, but dedicated to it. I agree with the position of putting it within the CAO's budget, and I look forward to it, and I ask that all council support this. One of the most important things that we will do this year, our community needs it, our community is expecting it, and this will give us some resources to do the job that we've committed to do. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Kent. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Thank you so much. Now that the motion has been amended, I will support it. Initially, I wasn't going to, but now that we've moved it out of the police budget and into the CAO's office, I think that is the right move. I want to thank Councillor Smith for bringing this forward. I think anyone who has watched the Board of Police Commission operate over the past few years, it has become more and more evident that they need support. They are dealing with very heavy, contentious, and complex issues. And having someone there that can be that solid support specifically for the board, I think is paramount in order for us to move forward in the next few years, when that level of complexity increases significantly as we begin to parcel out how that dual police model actually is integrated fully and works for the betterment of HRM. So thank you again for this. I really appreciate the move that we're moving, the direction that we're moving into. And yes, it's been a long day. It's been a long week. So thank you all.
Okay, thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. Go ahead, Councillor Blackburn.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and just asking for your support on this for various reasons. As a member of the current Board of Police Commission, I can say categorically that this is a body that is motivated. They are there because they want to enact change, and they have made it perfectly clear that the status quo is not good enough. And so I do ask for your support in doing this, in adding this money. For the first time ever, the Board of Police Commissioners are creating subcommittees and working groups. So, more is being asked of the individual members. We made that decision at our last work plan session that there were issues that we needed to do deeper dives on, and the only way to do that work was at the subcommittee or the working group level. This money will also help, if I'm not mistaken, with helping to pay for outside consultants and outside legal advice. It's something that really hasn't been done to date, but certainly we have branched out a bit in recent months and asked that we get outside opinions on a couple of issues. So, just wanting to clarify that this money is also earmarked for those types of situations. And the other thing too that I wanted to mention that something that I've asked about and asked Jacques about is about getting the reports that are requested by the Board of Police Commission added into Report Center, because up until now we've been asking for reports at the Board of Police Commission level. And, we make the ask and then it just sort of disappears into the ether. And so that is a request that has been made as well, that reports requested, just like other business units are being added into Report Center. It's been requested that the Board of Police Commission reports that are requested at that body be included so that we're all kept up to date on the status of those reports, and there is a level of accountability there as well. I'll leave it at there, and just if I could get confirmation from Chair Smith about the other ways that money could be spent, that would be great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, Councillor Blackburn. Actually, go ahead, Jacques.
So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
There's the mute button.
Yeah, sorry about that. I just wanted to make sure, this is just sort of falls in the category managing expectations. So to Councillor Blackburn's comment about Report Center. So there are a lot of demands on Report Center right at the moment, and we're trying to manage that the best way we can. So I put a process in motion to see what we can do on the Board of Police Commissioners reports. It's not going to be a short process. It'll probably take as much of this year in order to do that, because we're basically populating it with a whole bunch of other reports, as you well know. And so there has to be, and there also has to be, there's a bunch of security issues that are associated with this. So, we would have to give all the Board of Police Commissioners access and with their own emails, and we have to standardize all the privileges, and of course there's a public element to Report Center as well. We have to figure out and make sure that we can separate it all out. So, I basically said to this team that please proceed with that, but on the understanding that, when we brought in the procurement reports, which were internal, that process took over a year to complete, from implementation to training of the users. And I'll also note that property matters are in camera in Report Center, and other in-camera reports are deemed sensitive as well. So there'll be a lot of sensitivity around some of these reports that the Board of Police Commissioners, but we're prepared to work through it. But I just want to make sure everyone understands that that will not happen quickly. It'll likely take us up to a year to get through that.
No, completely understood. And understand. Just wanted to, communicate that the ask had been made and the wheels are in motion. So understand it's a work in progress. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Blackburn. Go ahead, Councillor Mancini.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I won't be long. Very quickly, a lot has it's already been said. I agree with Councillor Mason. I sat on the Board of Police Commission for 4 years. There's a lot of heavy lifting that goes on in that commission. And now, in front of us, I really like what Councillor Kent said, our next journey of policing. It is going to be a journey. We have 2 significant reports and more, actually. The defund report and 36 action items. And there's a lot of good stuff in there. I don't agree with it all, but there's a lot of good stuff in there that has to be the responsibility of the Board of Police Commission. They're going to need support to be able to go through that. The Worley report is still active and needs to continue to be front and center. So I fully support this. I think once we get through this whole budget process, this next year for the Board of Police Commission is going to be a game changer for those involved. It really is going to be. There's a huge opportunity to look at the way we do policing, and we have the other reports we talked about earlier. The chief talked about, my motion to look at our system of a dual police system, and there's other reports too. So it's going to be a big year when it comes to policing. So fully support this, colleagues, and hopefully you all do too. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mancini. Go ahead, Councillor Daigle-Gammon.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So yes, 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 we need to fund this. And I'm happy as well to have seen the friendly amendments to change it, to take it out of the police budget and for it to be within the CAO's office makes perfect sense. One of the things that I found astounding when I sat in on that 9-hour meeting of the Board of Police Commissioners is the rapid pace of information that is coming forward to that commission, and just how much is put on that commissioners to be able to do all of that work, to stay in step with all of that information and what needs to happen. I think it's incredible. And so, yeah, absolutely, this money is needed, and I really support it. I think the other only last comment would be that I also think that this is really essential because it will be unbiased. So it's not the RCMP coming, it's not HRP. This is have a resource that is objective in the information that they can come. I think the last police budget I had said, or the last meeting on the police budget, I had said that I think that next year when we look at the budget for policing is going to be so different. And so this resource is going to contribute to what that difference could be. So thank you, and absolutely support it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Daigle Gammon. Go ahead, Councillor Purdy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if someone can explain to me the significance of taking this position out of the HRP budget and transferring it to the CAO budget. And also a question just to Councillor Daigle Gammon's point about the unbiased position. What are the steps that will be taken to make sure that this position is an unbiased position in the hiring process? Like, who does the hiring? Because if there is someone with a strong bias one way or the other, that will influence the research and the information coming to the board. So what are the checks and balances for this?
You go ahead, Jacques.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the question. So to be clear on this, this is not about taking money from the HRP budget. Just that the motion was miswritten, I guess. The intent was never to put it as part of the HRP budget. This is a BAL item. This is a BAL budget adjustment list item where council will have to consider at the end of our budget process to add the position or not. So this would be an incremental position funded with incremental dollars to make that happen, right? So when you think about your question about, so it's a great question, and it's clear that this has to be part of, this has to be a position that supports the Board of Police Commissioners uniquely in its work, and in terms of its policy responsibilities, right? So the Board of Police Commissioners effectively can set board policy associated with policing as it applies to HRP, not the RCMP. Right, but this is strictly in relation to the policies of the board in relation to the police services provided by the police service, namely HRP. Those police policy for the RCMP is set nationally by the Commissioner of the RCMP and the Minister of Public Safety. Right. So when you look at it from that perspective, and the reason it's an unbiased kind of position is because the Board of Police Commissioners has to receive unbiased advice, like council receives unbiased advice, receives professional advice based on research and evidence that, you know, certain reports would go before the Board of Police Commissioners written by this person that would be hired, right? And it would also be, this person would also be supported by the rest of my policy team over there under Paul Johnson's leadership, because there are people like Amy Siciliano and Mary Chisholm and others that are working there, Connor O'Day, that will all work together effectively to look at various policy matters associated with not only the Board of Police Commissioners, but also with council, right? And council policy and council measures and projects and things like that. So this will be a great addition to that team, because this person would also be supported by the rest of that team and vice versa. So that's why it's important that it's an unbiased not a biased question in relation to RCMP versus HRP. It's there to support the function of the Board of Police Commissioners as the oversight body to both services, right?
Okay, thank you. That's actually very helpful. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Folks, we've been at this for 2 hours and 40 minutes, and I normally try and take a break more frequently than that. Would you like to take a 5-minute break? Or would you like to continue and move ahead?
How many speakers we got left?
3. Councillor Stoddard, yourself, and then Councillor Smith.
Well, Hensby doesn't talk too much. We'll be done in 5 minutes. So
I think we can be finished now. Yeah.
I'm going to withdraw, Mr. Chair. I'm going to withdraw because my answers, my question has been answered by Jacques. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Which means we are on to Councillor Hensby. Go ahead.
Just a question on the autonomy issue and stuff. Then the hiring of this person, if this gets approved, would it go through a process similar to our selection of chair people for the Bridge Commission or the Airport Authority? Would candidates be screened by the municipality and then the Police Commission interview them? Like, I'm just kind of curious, how will this position be determined in regards to who does the interview process and hiring process and maybe disciplinary process?
Mr. Chair, through you to the councillor, this position would fall under the employer here is the CAO on this position. If it was included in the BAL and approved by council, so like any other employee, this is a position that is hired by the CAO through our administrative policies and procedures. So what we would do is we would create a job description for this position, and we would then have a public competition for the position, advertise it like we normally do. We'd have an interview panel, and this person would be hired. I will, in the process of doing so, however, because this position will be there to support the Board of Police Commissioners, I would likely consult with the board chair on the not on the actual hiring per se, but on just to make sure that the position description is meeting the expectations of the board, right, in terms of that position description. But this position the person that's hired will be within GRIA, which falls under Paul's leadership, who reports directly to me. So that's how this would work. There would be a reporting relationship to Paul on the day-to-day operations, and therefore through the CAO. And ultimately, we'll be attending Board of Police Commissioners meetings and taking direction from the board in terms of what they want to be accomplished. Right.
On that interview panel, would be a member of the Police Commission on that panel but participate, or is it just all internal again?
This would be internal, yeah. It's not our practice to have interview panels comprised of board or council members.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Councillor Smith, to close. You are the last speaker on this.
Thank you. And really quickly, just to help answer some of the outstanding items or clarify, and Jacques mentioned a little bit about it, we also moved the board's budget, which I think it was $16,000 outside of the HRP budget, into Jacques' office. And that's something that Jacques didn't need council direction to do. It's just something that was done. So our budget originally was in HRP's budget. And that's been moved to Jacques' office just to help provide that autonomy. So that's one of the reasons why that wasn't corrected, because originally our budget was within HRP's budget, but that's been moved to the CAO's budget. Nothing to do with not increasing the HRP's budget or anything like that. In there's going to have to be some more discussion, as CAO said, as Jacques said, because part of it. A large part of it, I should say, is policy, but there's also the other aspect, working with departments like the DOJ, working with RCMP, HRP, working with community partners on not just the research, but also doing our duties as a board, which sometimes goes a little bit further than us at our meeting. So we're going to have to, as Jacques said, talk about that description, because it might be a policy person that also has a little bit of outreach included. But again, I do want to just highlight very quickly that I think we do need to have a little bit more discussion on where that person sits. The easy thing to do is definitely put it into our existing government relations body, because that's what we have at our disposal. But I'd be curious to know what other cities have done to resource their police commissions. So again, that's something that we can take back and have discussions with preparing as we move forward. And that's really it. So I thank everybody for the support so far. And when this comes back, there'll be some further information that hopefully we can provide to help folks understand the ask. With that, I'll call for the question.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Smith. We have no further speakers. The question has been called. Ian, it's over to you.
Beginning with District 6, Councillor Mancini.
I'm voting in favor of the motion.
7, Councillor Mason.
For the motion.
8, Councillor Smith.
4.
9, Councillor Cleary.
Yes.
10, Councillor Morse.
In favor.
11, Councillor Cuttle.
In favor.
12, Councillor Stoddard.
In favor of the motion?
13, Deputy Mayor Lovelace.
Voting yes.
14, Councillor Blackburn.
Voting in favor of the motion.
15, Councillor Russell.
In favor.
16, Councillor Outhit.
Councillor Outhit may have had to leave the meeting.
Mayor Savage.
In favor?
1, Councillor Daigle Gammon.
Voting in favor of the motion.
2, Councillor Hensby.
Affirmative.
3, Councillor Kent.
In favor.
4, Councillor Purdy.
Voting yes.
And 5, Councillor Austin.
In favor.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That motion passes. We have completed our agenda, except for adjournment. Can I please have a motion? Sorry. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the HRP and to the RCMP and to Jacques and John and Ian and your teams for bringing all of the information to us. Can I please have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Adjourn.
Thank you, Councillor Cuttle. We stand adjourned. Have a great weekend, everybody.
Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Enjoy the weekend.
Thank you. Thanks again, Mr. Chair.
Have a good one.